There's a moment, and it's almost never seen as it happens, when a woman decides to walk away. Not physically, not yet, but something inside her quietly closes. To the world, she's still there. She still cooks dinner. She still answers messages. She still smiles in photographs. But the smile no longer reaches her eyes, and the laughter is just muscle memory. Inside, the door to her heart has been locked, and the key has been thrown into a place where no one will ever find it. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." For many women, the journey to this acceptance begins in the wreckage of relationships that no longer honor who they are. And here lies the paradox. The more she accepts herself, the less she tolerates anything that diminishes her spirit. Walking away is rarely an act of sudden rebellion. It's not the stormy argument you see in films, where doors slam and plates shatter. It's a quiet revolution. A revolution that happens deep inside her mind long before her feet ever take the first step out the door. She begins to notice things differently. The words that once felt affectionate now sound like obligations. The touches that once sent warmth through her skin now feel like routine. The promises that once filled her with hope now sound like echoes bouncing inside an empty room. And the truth is, most people don't see her leaving until she's already gone. Because women who truly walk away, the ones who never come back, they don't give warnings. They've already given too many. They've spent months, maybe years, repeating their needs, softening their truths, bending themselves into shapes to fit someone else's comfort. Until one day, they realize bending has become breaking. So they choose silence over explanation, distance over negotiation, freedom over familiarity. It's not cruelty, it's clarity. To understand why a woman walks away and never returns, you have to understand that her decision is almost always made in private. Jung spoke often about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we keep hidden, sometimes even from our own conscious mind. In relationships, the shadow often contains our unmet needs, our buried resentment, our unspoken truths. A woman's decision to leave is born in this shadow space. It happens in the quietest of moments, while she's washing dishes and remembering the way she once felt seen, while she's lying in bed next to someone who feels miles away, while she's sitting in a cafe alone, realizing she feels more at peace than she does at home. These moments are invisible to everyone else, but they're the seeds of departure. And once planted, they grow roots deep into her psyche. She doesn't leave because of one argument or one broken promise. She leaves because of the accumulation, the 1,000 paper cuts no one noticed but her. The constant undercurrent of feeling unseen, unheard, and unvalued. Here's the part most men don't understand. By the time she says, "I'm done," she's been gone for a long time. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. She's already stepped into a new life in her mind. She's already imagined what her mornings will feel like without the weight of someone's indifference. She's already rehearsed the silence that will replace the constant negotiations for her worth. When she finally does leave physically, it looks sudden to the outside world. Friends might say, "I didn't see that coming." But if you look closely, the signs were always there. Her eyes stopped lighting up in conversation. As she stopped initiating touch, her laughter grew rarer, shorter. As she became harder to reach, even when she was sitting right next to you. This is what makes her departure irreversible. Because the woman who walks away without looking back is not escaping. She's returning. Returning to herself, to the parts of her identity that got lost in the noise of compromise. She doesn't walk away to punish anyone. She walks away because she's done punishing herself. And that's why she never returns. Once she's tasted the air of her own freedom, the thought of going back into emotional captivity feels like suffocation. Carl Jung believed that true transformation comes only when we confront the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we often deny or repress. For a woman who walks away, her journey into the shadow isn't optional. It's inevitable. First, she resists it. She tells herself the same stories she's told for years. It's not so bad. Everyone has flaws. I just need to be more patient. But shadow work has a way of stripping away illusions. Eventually, she's forced to face what she's been avoiding. the truth about herself, her relationship, and the compromises she's been making to keep the peace. She sees the patterns clearly now. How she silenced her opinions to avoid arguments. How she diminished her dreams to make someone else feel secure. How she tolerated behaviors she swore she'd never accept. In Jungian terms, she is confronting her anima, her deep feminine essence, the part of her that demands authenticity and wholeness. The shadow work reveals not just the pain of her relationship, but the pain of her own self-abandonment. And here's the thing. Once she sees it, she can't unsee it. This is the point where her decision to walk away becomes irreversible. Not because the relationship is suddenly worse, but because she realizes she's been living a half-life. She's been inhabiting a smaller version of herself, molded to fit someone else's comfort zone. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." She finally understands that staying would mean surrendering her growth to a life she no longer believes in. Leaving, on the other hand, means walking straight into the unknown. But this time, she's ready. Her shadow work gives her something she hasn't felt in years: self-trust. She knows she can stand alone, not because she wants to prove anything, but because she has already survived worse, the quiet erosion of her soul. Long before the bags are packed or the final conversation happens, there is a fading, slow, almost imperceptible. First, it's small things. She no longer rushes to share good news. She starts going to bed earlier, reading instead of talking. Her phone calls to friends become longer, while her conversations with him grow shorter. This fading is not dramatic. It's the opposite. It's so gentle that the other person may think everything is fine. But inside her, the shift is seismic. She begins to detach emotionally, not out of spite, but as a form of self-preservation. Love, once vibrant and electric, becomes something distant, not gone, but transformed into memory. She remembers how it once felt to be cherished, but she no longer feels it in the present. Carl Jung described individuation as becoming the person you were always meant to be, distinct and whole. In this fading stage, she realizes she can no longer be that person here. The environment no longer nurtures her. Instead, it keeps her rooted in a version of herself she has already outgrown. Here's the quiet truth. She's not waiting for someone to notice anymore. She stopped hoping for change. She stopped making mental lists of if-only scenarios. The longing is gone, and once the longing dies, the love rarely survives. This is what makes her walking away final. By the time she physically leaves, the relationship is already a ghost she's been living with for months, maybe years. She knows that if she stays, she will only keep fading, until there's nothing left of the woman she once was. And she refuses to vanish inside her own life. So she walks, not hurriedly, not angrily, but with the calm of someone who has made peace with her decision. And when she does, there is no looking back. Not because she hates what she's leaving, but because she loves what she's returning to, herself. Society loves to paint women who leave as fragile, unstable, or incapable of making it work. The whispers go around quietly at first, then grow louder. She gave up too easily. She's afraid of commitment. She just couldn't handle it. These stories are convenient. They protect the status quo. They make it easier to believe that staying, no matter the cost, is the only respectable choice. But here's the truth. Walking away takes more strength than staying in something that is slowly hollowing you out. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's what she does when she leaves. She accepts that her needs, dreams, and boundaries are real, and that they matter. She refuses to live a life that betrays them. Leaving isn't weakness. It's the ultimate act of self-respect. It's also an act of defiance against a culture that tells women their worth is measured by their ability to endure. The myth of weakness falls apart when you look closely. Weakness is silencing yourself so others feel comfortable. A weakness is shrinking so someone else can stand taller. Weakness is pretending you're fine when every part of you is asking for change. Strength, on the other hand, is walking away with no guarantee of what comes next. Strength is enduring the loneliness of starting over rather than the loneliness of staying unseen. When she goes, She isn't running from life. She's running toward it. Toward a version of herself that's fuller, bolder, and unafraid of the unknown. This is why the myth of weakness doesn't survive long in her presence. Anyone who truly sees her knows. It takes far more courage to leave than to stay. When a woman walks away, she doesn't step into instant peace. The first weeks, sometimes months, can feel like moving through smoke after the fire. The world is quieter, but still filled with the echoes of what burned. There's the grief, of course. Even if she's certain of her choice, she mourns what could have been. She grieves the version of herself who once believed this was her forever. But beneath that grief, something else begins to stir. Freedom. It starts subtly, small choices that require no negotiation. She wakes up when she wants. She arranges her home to match her tastes, not to compromise. She spends money without explaining every purchase. She starts saying yes to things she used to decline, and no to things she endured out of obligation. This freedom isn't about being reckless. It's about reclaiming authorship over her life. Jung spoke often about the process of individuation, shedding the borrowed identities we carry so we can become whole. This is her individuation in action. For the first time in years, she isn't editing herself to fit someone else's story. She's writing her own, line by line. Here's what surprises her. She doesn't miss the constant compromise. She doesn't crave permission before she acts. She doesn't feel the old pull to go back, because she knows the cost. The fire she walked through made sure she'd never forget it. Over time, the loneliness transforms. It stops being a void and becomes a space. A space she fills with new people, new passions, and most importantly, with her own presence. The freedom after the fire doesn't feel like escape. It feels like arrival. She realizes she didn't just leave someone behind. She came back to herself. And that's why she never returns. Once you've known this kind of freedom, you understand it's not something anyone else can give you, and it's certainly not something you're willing to lose again. When a woman finally leaves and doesn't come back, she doesn't just walk away from a relationship. She steps into a deeper, more challenging journey, meeting the parts of herself she once avoided. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow is about all the hidden aspects of our personality, traits we suppress, ignore, or deny because they feel unacceptable or unlovable. For many women, these shadows include anger, ambition, independence, sensuality, and even the ability to say no without guilt. While in the relationship, she may have kept these traits locked away, fearing they would disrupt harmony or provoke rejection. But the moment she walks away, those shadows begin to stir. And here's the truth: they are not her enemies. They are her allies. Her anger becomes her fuel. Her ambition becomes her map. Her independence becomes her foundation. Her sensuality becomes her own, no longer performed for someone else's approval. This process isn't always pretty. The shadow doesn't arrive politely. It crashes in like a storm, forcing her to sit with uncomfortable truths. She has to face the fact that she, too, played a role in silencing herself. She has to acknowledge that part of her stayed too long because she feared the unknown. But in integrating the shadow, she becomes whole. She no longer tries to be the good woman at the expense of being the real woman. Jung believed that wholeness, not perfection, is the goal of life. And that's what she embraces now. A self that is both gentle and fierce, compassionate and unapologetic. She is no longer afraid of her own depth. When you integrate your shadow, you stop living for the gaze of others. You stop asking for permission to be complete. And this, more than anything, is why she never returns. She can't shrink back into half of herself once she's known the fullness of who she is. People often wonder, if she loved him once, why won't she try again? They underestimate how profoundly walking away changes a woman. The truth is, leaving isn't just a physical act. It's a psychological and spiritual threshold. It's the moment she realizes she can survive without the safety net she thought she needed. This realization rewires something deep inside her. As she stops chasing validation, as she stops bargaining for scraps of affection, as she stops believing that love must come at the expense of her peace. And here's the key. Once a woman has lived in the truth of her own strength, she cannot unsee it. There is no amnesia strong enough to erase that memory. Going back would mean betraying herself. It would mean pretending she hasn't grown, pretending she hasn't seen the difference between surviving and living. The shift is not just about independence, it's about identity. She is no longer his partner or someone's other half. She is whole on her own. This doesn't mean she closes herself off to love forever. But if love comes again, it must meet her where she is now, on equal ground, without the power imbalances she once accepted. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Walking away was her act of making the unconscious conscious. She saw her patterns, her compromises, her unspoken pain, and she chose not to let them dictate her future. This is the irreversible shift. Once you've crossed it, you don't go back. You may carry the memories, but you no longer live in them. She walks forward not because she hates what was behind her, but because she's too alive to stop moving toward what's ahead. And that's why the truth about women who walk away and never return is this: they don't just leave a man, they leave a version of themselves they've outgrown. And once they've met the woman they were always meant to be, there's no returning to the cage, no matter how gilded it once seemed. One of the most misunderstood qualities of women who walk away for good is this: they rarely give long explanations. They don't spend hours trying to convince others why they left. They don't fight to justify their decision. They don't beg to be understood. Why? Because true liberation comes with a strange, unexpected peace, the peace of no longer needing approval. In the past, she might have explained herself endlessly. She might have tried to make others see her pain, validate her choice, and agree that she was right to leave. But as she grows into herself, she learns that closure is not something you get from someone else. It's something you give yourself. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires you to stand apart from the collective when necessary. It means daring to hold your truth even if no one else sees it. And here's the quiet power. She knows her story, and that's enough. She knows her limits, and that's enough. She knows her worth, and that's more than enough. Silence becomes her shield. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of someone who refuses to waste energy defending what she already knows is right for her. In a world obsessed with explaining and proving, her lack of explanation feels like a rebellion. It is, because refusing to explain is a statement. I don't need you to agree for my choice to be valid. And this terrifies some people, especially those who relied on her to always put their comfort before her truth. But her calm, grounded refusal to justify herself is the final act of emotional sovereignty. When a woman walks away and never returns, her absence leaves a mark. Not just on the man she left, but on everyone who witnessed her decision. Some will misunderstand it. They will call her cold, ungrateful, or unforgiving. But others, especially women still stuck in cycles of self-abandonment, will see her choice as a spark, a quiet permission slip to claim their own freedom. Her departure becomes a story, sometimes whispered, sometimes told boldly. She left, and she never came back. For those who listen closely, it's not a story about abandonment. It's a story about rebirth. In Jungian terms, she has completed a cycle of death and renewal. She let an old self die so a new one could be born. This new self lives with a different set of rules she writes for herself. The legacy she leaves is not only about independence. It's about showing others what it looks like to live from a place of wholeness rather than fear. She models a life where peace is more important than appearances, where self-respect outweighs comfort, and where love, if it exists, must be free, equal, and mutual. And here's the truth. Some will resent her for it, because seeing someone else live with that level of freedom can be confronting. It forces people to ask uncomfortable questions about their own lives. But the ones who are ready, the ones standing on the edge of their own transformation, will take her story as proof that it's possible. Her absence becomes presence. Her silence becomes a voice. Her act of walking away becomes a kind of mirror, reflecting back to others the possibility of their own courage. This is her legacy, not that she left, but that she chose herself. And in doing so, she showed others that they could, too.